Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I would like to introduce Microtoxins and pass it off.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Katie, for having us. Thanks for everyone who's joining us on YouTube and who's here live on the Zoom webinar. My name is Sakari Rogers. I am one of the business development managers here at Certified Indoor Environmental. For those of you that aren't as familiar with us, we are a general contractor that specializes in providing non-destructive mold remediation, asbestos testing, and indoor air quality testing and treatment as well. So today we're going to talk about indoor air quality, kind of some tips and tricks for yourself and that you can pass along to your buyers and sellers. We'll touch on pollutants, and one of those being mold, and a little bit just to backtrack a little bit about us. We are a local company that services Southwest Washington, Portland metro area, and Salem metro area. We have been locally owned by Mark and Tammy Ritacco since 2011. And we do give free estimates to our brokers when mold has been called out in a home inspection. So I'll put some information in the chat for you to take a look at. There'll also be a handout to follow along with, and we'll send some resources after the class. But with that, just any questions you can throw in the chat, and I'll go ahead and hand it over to our managing partner, Mark Ritacco.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for attending this presentation. I'm going to share my screen with you and we'll get started here. Hopefully everybody's having a great day. All right, today we're going to talk about what is acceptable indoor air quality. And the reason for that is the average American spends about 90% of their time indoors. And the indoor environment is about 2 to 5 times more polluted than the outdoor environment. Obviously, that's on any given day, but on average, the indoor environment is a lot more polluted than the outdoor environment. A little bit about myself. Okay, let's skip that. So today we're going to discuss what is indoor air quality, what the health effects are of poor indoor air quality, the most common indoor pollutants. We're going to talk a little bit about mold and mycotoxins. We're going to talk about strategies that the average homeowner can actually do to improve their indoor air quality. You don't necessarily always have to bring out a professional company to do it. There's a lot of things that homeowners can do themselves. We're going to talk about indoor air quality testing methods, the pros and cons of each kind. And then a little bit more about certified indoor environmental. I always like to talk about the definition of indoor air quality. And indoor air quality just kind of refers to the air quality within and around buildings as it relates to the health and comfort of the building occupants. So that's all that stands for, IAQ. Like to discuss some fun facts regarding indoor air quality. Every day, the average American, they breathe about 3,000 gallons of air a day. We just think about that, 3,000 gallons of air. That's a lot of air we're breathing. Now, we're supposed to drink a lot of water every day, and we are testing our water all the time to make sure it's safe to drink. But we're not testing our air quality on the indoor environment every day to make sure it's safe to breathe. Why not? Each American spends about 90% of their time indoors. Obviously, with the coronavirus, we've been spending much more time indoors than we normally do. As I stated earlier, that air quality is 2 to 5 times more polluted than the outdoor air. And the EPA actually has listed air quality as one of the top 5 environmental risks to public health. 95%, 96% of living spaces have at least one indoor air quality problem. So what is that issue in your home? Let's see if you can identify it throughout this presentation. Another term I want you to get familiar with is particulate matter. Particulate matter is basically the size of a particle. And so particle size directly affects our health. And to give you some idea of different sizes, the human hair is about 50 to 70 microns in diameter. Your allergens, like your dust, pollen, mold, that's about 10 microns in size. Your combustion particles, that's what we measure outside. That's about 2.5 microns. And then you may be familiar with the coronavirus. That's about 0.12 microns in diameter. A fun fact is that those N95 masks, they'll protect down to 0.1 micron with a 95% efficiency. That's where they get their name. N95 protects down to 0.1 micron at a 95% efficiency. So particulate matter, very important when it comes to looking at overall health. If we're breathing these fine particles, it can cause some severe health issues. We'll cover that in a little bit. There's a current air quality index. It's called the AQI, Air Quality Index Scale. You can go anytime and look online, a website called airnow.gov, and we're measuring consistently the outdoor air quality. And it'll give us anywhere from good to moderate. And unfortunately, Oregon, Portland metro area, last year, we were the hazardous level because of all the fires. So they're measuring particulate matter in the air, 2.5 microns, and they can determine based on the amount of particulates in the air, whether it's hazardous or not. Well, that same thing can be used for determining the indoor air quality to see whether it's healthy or not. So if you want to know whether it's safe to be outside, what that scale is, you can just go down to airnow.gov and look up at any time and see what the air quality is. Now, particulate matter, it does affect your health. Your reactions to sources of pollutant can be immediate, they can be delayed. Some of the symptoms that people have when they're breathing in too much particulates, throat irritation, nasal stuffiness, eye irritation, coughing, wheezing, a lot of hay fever-like symptoms, runny nose, red eyes, sneezing. We're breathing in allergens or particulates, and it's affecting our health, all the way from allergens to sometimes really severe health issues. The particle size, that's really directly linked to causing health problems. The smaller the diameter, when it gets below 10 microns, it can go deep into your lungs. And some of these particulates, because they're so small, will go right into your bloodstream. Some of these particulates are carcinogenic and can lead to severe issues with your heart, your lung, liver, things of that nature. So people that have immune compromised system, heart and lung diseases, asthma, young children, older adults, they can be at greater risk for or from PM exposure, particulate matter exposure. So a lot of the particulates, if we're breathing so much in, gets into our lungs, and our lungs aren't able to get those particulates out fast enough, it can overwhelm the system and cause severe health issues. So that's what we want to be aware. Breathing in too much particulate matter over a period of time can cause major health issues. And it really doesn't matter what the type of that particulate is. It's more about the volume and the size. Obviously, there are some particulates in the air that can cause more health issues, but overall, we want to make sure that we're not breathing a lot of these pollutants. So there's normally 3 categories of pollutants according to the Environmental Protection Agency. These 3 categories are your combustion pollutants. This is what we're really measuring outside is the combustion pollutants. These are your gases. Inside a structure, we're really looking at gas appliances. If you're using fireplaces, gas stoves, those things are going to be your combustion pollutants for the indoor environment. The other one is we're looking at VOCs. Now, VOCs just means volatile organic compounds. Think of chemicals that are being released as gases into the air. Household products probably come to mind. Maybe your paints, your varnishes, cleaning supplies. Those are kind of the typical VOCs that we see polluting the air. Some ones that we don't normally talk about are your building materials. We'll discuss that a little bit. And then lastly, your asthma allergy triggers. These are your molds, your dusts, mites, your pollen, secondhand smoke, pet dander. So these are the three categories that we look at for the indoor environment. Most of the time we get called regarding number 3, which is the asthma allergen triggers. I want to talk a little bit about carbon monoxide. When we talk about the health effects of carbon monoxide, we're required in the state of Oregon to have carbon monoxide detection devices inside our homes. And what I want you to understand is that those devices only go off at the really high concentrations. So healthy people can suffer from fatigue and other issues at very low concentrations, and thinking that, well, it's not carbon monoxide because my device isn't going off. But at low levels, you can have fatigue in healthy people. At moderate concentrations, you can have impaired vision, reduced brain function, kind of a brain fog. And then obviously at the higher levels, it can lead to death. So just understand that, you know, when we go in and we look at indoor air quality and we're measuring things, you know, ruling out everything else, we may be having a health effect due to low levels or moderate levels of carbon monoxide that the alarms that we have in our homes aren't actually setting off. So be aware of that. Now, when we talk about volatile organic compounds, they're going to be emitted by many products, as we discussed earlier. People don't really think about candles and room fresheners. There's an odor in their home, so, oh, I'll light a candle, or maybe I'll spray a room freshener. Well, you're really releasing into the air a VOC, and those VOCs, you know, can cause sensitivity to some individuals, and they're also, you know, depending on the product they're using, cause issues. Obviously, your paints, your lacquers, those things should be stored in your garage, not inside your house. Pesticides, insect repellents, all those are VOCs. We had a customer called us up. They were located in Hillsboro, Oregon, and that customer was complaining that they had mold issues. And when I got on site, I noticed that they were living in a tent in the middle of their living room with their dog. And I asked him what was going on. He says, well, I can't stop scratching. You know, there's got to be a mold issue here. Everything I looked online directs it to a mold. And I noticed that there was a flea bomb in the corner. And he said, oh, yeah, we had some fleas also. I used that flea bomb. It didn't work the first time or the second time or the third time. And I says, well, how many times did you set off flea bombs in your home? Well, I set it off about 8 to 10 times. So this individual contaminated his whole structures with a chemical that now he's having a reaction to. And so his whole structure needed to be decontaminated from a pesticide. So be very careful when you're using any kind of cleaning agents or pesticides, that you're following the instructions very closely to make sure that you're having a well ventilated space when you're doing all this. The reason for that, again, goes back to particulate size. those VOCs are very small and they'll go right into your bloodstream and they can cause some very serious health effects. So make sure you're following the instructions from the manufacturer. They're there for a reason, and it's to prevent any kind of health effects. Asthma allergy triggers, again, pretty typical. We get calls, especially during this time of year. People are having allergens and so forth, and they just, it seems like my allergens are worse this year. I probably have a mold issue in my home. And the reality is you're not going to have a mold issue in your home unless you've had some kind of water damage or moisture issue. Mold has to have moisture for it to grow. If you don't have any visible mold, you probably don't have a mold issue, but you may have some other issue in that structure unrelated to mold that's causing these allergen triggers. So pollen, dust, dust mites, pet dander, mold, those are really the asthma allergen triggers that we normally see out there. Obviously, bugs, insects, these are the biological factors we can run into.
Now it's time to zoom into the microscopic world of the tiny creatures that inhabit our everyday lives.
There's nothing like collapsing into a freshly made bed at the end of a long, hard day. Crisp sheets, plump pillows, a warm, clean place where you can escape the grime and the grind of day-to-day existence.
Or can you? Just how clean is your bed? Well, you might be horrified at the things you can sleep with. Meet Harry and his chums. Harry's a dust mite, or Dermatophagoides terranicinus. Try saying that 10 times quickly. He's an ugly sucker, but fortunately, you'll never come face to face with him. At just 0.2 to 0.3 of a millimetre long, it's virtually impossible to see him with the naked eye. And he'll certainly never see you because he hasn't got any eyes.
In the average bed, there can be anything from 100,000 to 2 million dust mites.
It's extraordinary. And a 2-year-old pillow, the weight of it, 10% of it could be dead mites and their excretions.
Ew. And you know what they live on?
Dead skin cells.
Yeah, if it wasn't for them, we'd probably be wading around in dead skin.
Well, they do a great job.
Yeah, good housekeepers. Bye, Harry. Keep up the good work.
Good night. Sleep tight.
I always like to show that video. Everybody immediately goes on to Amazon or someplace and buys some new pillows. Probably should be replacing your pillows, once a year. Those pillows normally, can have a lot of viruses, bacteria, things in them, including dust mites. And dust mites are probably one of the most common allergy, asthma symptoms out there. And people don't really think about dust mites. And obviously, after you look at that video, you probably don't want to think about dust mites either. But they are in, soft furnishings, not just related to your bed. So how do we control dust mites? How do we eliminate that potential allergen from our home? They feed on human skin. They tend to thrive in rooms that are above 40% humidity and temperatures above 70 degrees. That's perfect here for the Northwest climate that we have. But what can you do? One of the things that they advise is to purchase allergen-proof encasings. You can get those for your pillows and mattresses, box springs. They're not very expensive. I think you can get some pillowcases for about $10 for a set of 2. So very reasonable. Should be washing your linens once a week in hot water. That'll eliminate the dust mites. Use a vacuum. Vacuum your mattress. Vacuum weekly. Make sure you're using a vacuum that contains a HEPA filter on it or a double layer bag. That'll collect the dust mites. The other thing is like if you have kids or grandchildren with stuffed toys, they'll have dust mites on them. But you can put those in your freezer, put them in a freezer bag, 3 to 5 hours per week. That'll kill the dust mites also. Change your furnace and air filters, regularly. That helps also. If you're still having issues, you can use a home air purifier as long as it's rated for that. So there are ways to control it. Again, they're not just in your bedroom, but they'll be in dust. So if you have a really dusty environment, dust itself will contain all sorts of things, everything from pollen to viruses and bacteria, dust mites, things of that nature. So it's important to keep a clean environment. Back in September, Portland was placing in the #1 position for the worst air quality among major cities in the world. And we created this blog that you can download on how to make sure that you're keeping your indoor air quality healthy during that period of time. So again, you want to make sure that you're making sure that the indoor air quality is safe. And we check the outdoor air quality. We got a lot of reports on it. It's all measuring particulate matter. And it really didn't matter to them whether that was pollen out there or smoke particles from the fires. It's the quantity and the amount of the particulates. And if it's low enough, it really doesn't matter whether it's all from pollen or all from something else. It's the amount that is the health issue. So we get a lot of people, especially from the real estate community. They have a inspection, it has mold, people panic about it. The reality is, it's not unusual to find mold in homes in the Pacific Northwest, but it is important to understand, why that is and how to correct it so we don't have those issues in the future. Don't panic about it. Get educated. We have a built environment. In that built environment, we are tightening up these buildings more and more as we design them. They're not getting adequate ventilation. They're poorly exhausted. And you couple that with the climate conditions, lifestyle issues, it can create an environment for mold and mycotoxins to grow. We've seen a lot more mold growth in structures the last 12 months than we ever have. And there are some reasons for that. A lot of those reasons are based on the humidity in these structures. More people are living at home. College kids are there 24/7. Maybe school children are there 24/7 rather than going off to school. Parents are working from home. There's more cooking, more showering, more people living in this indoor environment. And that indoor environment is creating humidity issues. And these homes weren't designed to be lived in 24/7 by the amount of people that are there. These homes are designed that people are going to be there for a certain number of hours per day. But they're going to be vacating so that it has a chance to heat up, cool down, heat up, cool down. Well, that's not happening when we've been through this coronavirus pandemic. People are living in these homes and cooking throughout the day, showering throughout the day. So we're ending up with a lot of lifestyle issues, too many occupants, and it's creating some mold issues. So important things to be aware of. If you got a lot of furniture against the walls in this type of environment, you could end up with poor airflow, creating mold behind those furniture. And you wouldn't even know about it because it's up against the wall. So we see that a lot. Old windows obviously can cause condensation issues. Again, mold needs moisture to grow. So you want to make sure that you're keeping those windows clean and dry as much as possible. Obviously, plumbing failures, poor building designs, that all leads to issues with creating mold in the indoor environment. I want to talk a little bit about mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are basically byproducts of many molds. The name suggests myco, that means related to fungi. Toxin is literally a toxic substance. Not all molds produce mycotoxins. Some varieties produce more than one type of mycotoxin. And even though a mold may be capable of producing a mycotoxin, that doesn't mean that they always are doing so. So that may not be in the cycle that it needs to. Mycotoxins are molecules, they're very lightweight. It's easy for them to remain airborne for an indeterminate amount of time. They cause disease and death in both humans and animals. Some of these mycotoxins are known to be carcinogens, and they're listed as hazardous. So mycotoxins, we don't do a lot right now with testing the indoor environment for mycotoxins. There's not a method currently to check the air for high levels of mycotoxins, but the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, they monitor the amount of mycotoxins on the food that we ingest. So again, it's a byproduct of molds. They enter our body through ingestion, inhalation, or even through the skin. And it's when we're breathing these mycotoxins in that really causes issues because it goes right into our bloodstream. They're a known carcinogen, and it can lead to a lot of health issues. So some of those health issues, when we talk about mold, most people look at mold as an allergen, but we're not really looking in depth at the issues of exposure to the mycotoxins. And the reason for that, more than anything else, is they don't have a test designed to test the air quality for mycotoxins. Now that's going to change here. There's a company that has designed an airborne test for mycotoxins, which will be a great help for people that are having some health issues and they can't relate it to anything else. They may have a building that had some water damage and there's some residual mycotoxins in that structure. The mold remediation protocols don't have the ability to treat for mycotoxins. So all these water damaged buildings may still have exposure to mycotoxins, even though the contractor did all the proper steps to remediate it. Well, they're remediating it for mold spores, but they're not remediating it to remove the mycotoxins. And the reason for that is they didn't know they were there and they had no method to test whether they were there or whether it was gone. That's going to change. And I think by the end of the year, you're going to see a lot of people doing testing for mycotoxins for health issues and to make sure it's done correctly. But some of the symptoms, headaches, fatigue, chronic pain, depression, cognitive issues, rashes, weight gain, digestive inflammation, those are all some of the things when you have exposure to mycotoxins. I always want to review this. When it comes to mold remediation, there's no federal or state regulations. There's only industry standards or guidelines. These are from the CDC, the EPA, and the industry itself. But the goal is, when you come across mold, is to remove it from the structure, not to kill it. And all remove means is either remove it by cleaning. So if it's surface mold, let's say from a bathroom, you can clean it. Or you can remove it by removing the contaminated material. So maybe you have a mold on drywall, the drywall itself is compromised because it's water damaged. Well, then you're removing the mold by removing the material. That's all it means. Don't want to kill it. Dead mold is still allergenic. Some dead mold is still potentially toxic. Got to fix the water problem. because that's what mold needs to grow. And then lastly, you're not supposed to paint over it. It's supposed to be removed. So those are the guidelines. There's no state or federal regulations here in Oregon. There's only 3 states that require licensing. That's Texas, Florida, and New York. Now, what causes interior mold to grow? Obviously, high humidity can be an issue, especially in the bathrooms. So make sure you're using your bathroom fans. But we're seeing a lot of increased cooking, showering, laundry, increased occupancy. That's been causing a lot of issues over the last 24 months. So that's an issue. So make sure that you're ventilating really well for that. We have the ability to clean the surface mold. We have professional products to do that aren't available to most homeowners. And we can typically clean the drywall if it's surface mold rather quickly. And usually afterwards, we don't have to paint. So fast, easy method. One of the things I mentioned earlier, you don't want to paint over mold because eventually the mold will come back. It'll grow on those protective barriers. So let's make sure that that's completely removed. If you have mold up in an attic, we have a process where we can just apply a product and it dissolves all the mold, gets to the root structure so that it's completely looking like brand new. So let's talk about solutions for improving the indoor air quality. And there's 3 main ways to do that. One is through source control. The other one is to improve the ventilation. And then obviously the most expensive is air cleaners. So let's go through each one of these. When we're talking about source control, it's the most cost-efficient approach. And it's just simply making sure that we find the source of the pollution, we eliminate it, or we reduce those emissions. Examples would be smoke's an allergen, so don't smoke in your home. Make sure you have a carbon monoxide sensor. Make sure that you're having your gas stoves, gas furnace adjusted to decrease emissions. They recommend doing that once a year. Fix the cracks in the walls, floors, and ceilings around windows and doors. Those are all some of the source controls. Other ones would be don't open your windows and doors when we have a poor air quality day outside. You don't want that poor air quality contaminating the indoor air quality. So those are all things you can control in your home. Don't use organic cleaning products or low VOC cleaning products, low VOC paint products. Those are all things that you can control inside your structure. Airflow is crucial for good indoor air quality. You want to make sure you're getting airflow through your house. What that does is basically removes that stagnant air and it refreshes it with good outdoor air quality. How do we do this? One option is basically to simply open your doors and windows of your home. It basically rejuvenates the indoor air quality. So open your windows for about 5 to 10 minutes. Do it on an every other day basis, even if you don't know exactly how polluted the air is inside your home. So bring that fresh air in. Again, obviously you want to make sure that the outdoor air is healthy, but ventilate that home, get that fresh air in. You're going to basically dilute that poor air quality with good indoor air quality, and it makes a significant difference. Make sure that you're utilizing your mechanical ventilation. Utilize your bathroom and your kitchen exhaust fans. Make sure that you're using your heating system or air conditioning that has a filter on it. It's filtering your air. Most of the mechanical systems out there for your furnace systems have a good furnace filter on them. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The commercial buildings actually pull and filter the outdoor air and circulate that through the structure. Most residential homes recirculate the indoor air. So some of the higher end homes will actually mimic the commercial structures, and they'll pull in outdoor air and filter that before it recirculates into your home. So they're diluting it mechanically that way rather than opening and closing the doors and windows. Attic ventilation is very important. Want to make sure you're ventilating your attic really well so you can avoid microbial growth up there. So make sure it's balanced. Air filters are very important. The higher the MERV rating, the better effectiveness is. MERV just means minimum efficiency rating value. So there's a certain standard out there for how well these filters work. MERV 8 filter for your furnace, that eliminates your pollen, your dust, dust mites, debris, pet dander. If you step it up to a MERV 11, that'll also eliminate pollen. It also eliminate mold spores and car fumes and smog. MERV 13 will eliminate tobacco smoke, bacteria, viruses, carriers, and allergens. So the higher the MERV rating, the more effective it is to remove those. So it's important, though, to really understand when you are increasing that MERV rating that your furnace can actually accept it. Some of these older furnaces can only accept a MERV 8. And if you put a MERV 13 in it, it restricts the airflow and can do some damage to your furnace. So make sure that whatever filter you're using, make sure it's rated for that furnace. I often get asked a question how often we should change our furnace filters. And the typical answer is every 3 months. What I recommend is every 3 months, check the furnace filter. Depending on your lifestyle, whether you have pets and kids, where you're living, that furnace filter may need to be changed more often or less often, depending on those issues. You may find that a MERV 13 is going to clog a lot faster than a MERV 8. So it may need to be changed more than a MERV 8 does. So again, it's really based on your lifestyle. Get in the habit of checking it every 3 months. And then after a while, you can set the parameters of how often you need to check it or change it. Vacuums. When you think about a vacuum, think about it as an air processing machine. We're going to pick up all the dust, dirt, debris, viruses, pollen, dust mites, and we're going to process that and we're going to throw it back up in the air. So if you don't have a good filtration media as a bag or a filter, all those light dust particles that contain all those allergens, they're just going to get blown out of the exhaust port and right up into the air, and you're going to start breathing those. A good example would be if you had a system that had a bag in it. Those bags, basically, I always ask people, how often do you change those vacuum bags? And the typical answer is, well, when it's full. Well, if that's the typical time that you do it, you usually, depending on your habits of vacuuming, if it's only once a week, you're allowing a week of everything, all that dust, dirt, viruses to percolate for a week. And then when you turn that vacuum back on, what do you notice? All of a sudden, you have this air permeating into the air and you can smell this odor. Well, that's coming from that vacuum bag, just releasing those fine particulates back into the air. So I always recommend people that have pollen or allergy issues, look for a good sealed system. A good sealed system usually has a double layered bag in it. It's all sealed. So it really has a HEPA filter on it, which really keeps those from being re-released, those particles re-released into the environment. For those of us that don't suffer from a lot of allergens and so forth, bagless system works just fine. Dyson makes a pretty good one, so does the Shark Navigator. What I like about the bagless ones is you can basically empty those every single time. And if you have a bagless one and you're like me, if you vacuum once a week, you go, gee whiz, I didn't realize how much dust, dirt, and grime was in that carpet when I vacuum each time. So they're kind of a visual of, I need to vacuum more. Portable air cleaners. We get a lot of questions on this. Are they helpful? Yeah, absolutely. But they got to make sure that they're sized for the room. There's many types of these portable air cleaners. I often go into a home and people will say, hey, I've got a portable air cleaner here. And I look at it and it is a little miniature tabletop one that's next to their bed. So that portable air cleaner isn't sized to clean the air of that room. Can't possibly be sized large enough. So if you're going to get a portable air cleaner, you want to make sure it's sized for the room. You want to make sure that it is going to remove the particles that you want it to. Every portable air cleaner has a filter, just like your furnace filter. They have a rating, and you want to make sure it's designed to remove the particulate that you're looking for. And just like your furnace filters, these filters need to be changed also. So you need to monitor those, change them every 3 months. Otherwise, they're not working efficiently. So a lot of people have these portable air cleaners. They never change their filter and think that it's working. So make sure it's sized for your room. Make sure you're changing the air filters regularly, and also understand the degree of filtration that it has. Lastly, most of these air cleaners don't filter out gaseous pollutants. So if that's something you're looking for, there are portable air cleaners that will do that also. It just depends on the actual filter, and usually it has to be a charcoal filter to do that. Air duct cleaning. One thing about air duct cleaning, there's been some studies out there of how effective air duct cleaning is to improve the indoor air quality. The EPA did a wonderful study on air duct cleaning, and you can type in EPA air duct cleaning study, and it'll pop up, and there's a 3 or 4 page summary of their report. The Air Duct Cleaning Association also did their own study, and you can imagine that these two studies don't agree. The EPA does not recommend the air ducts be cleaned except on an as-needed basis. And the reason for that is that there is uncertainty about the benefits of air duct cleaning. So their studies have demonstrated that the particulate level in the homes don't necessarily increase due to dirty air ducts, and that they don't necessarily decrease after cleaning them. So just be aware of that. And there's no evidence that a light amount of household dust or other particulate matter in the ducts pose any risk to health. And that's according to the EPA study. Now, what I do want to say is there are some common sense things when you look at air duct cleaning. If I was to move into a new home, I'm going to have my air ducts cleaned prior to moving in. The reason for that is I have no idea how that furnace system was maintained. I don't know how they maintained the ductwork. They could have had all sorts of pollutants in that structure, never changed their furnace filter, and those ducts could be pretty contaminated. So I'm going to have them cleaned before I move in. So I start with a clean base. So baseline cleaned, and then I'm going to maintain my filter and make sure that that's being changed regularly. And after that, I'm probably never going to have my air ducts cleaned again. I hear some people say that I'm going to get them cleaned after I have a contractor in the structure, because they're creating all this dust. Well, I may have my contractor seal up the ducts so that they're not polluting my areas. But other than that, normally not going to have my ducts cleaned once I've done the initial cleaning. Let's talk a little bit about whether mold or not should be tested. We get this question all the time. CDC basically says we don't recommend routine sampling for molds. It's not necessary to know what the species is. EPA says if mold growth is present, sampling is unnecessary. The mold should be removed. So basically, CDC, EPA, if you have mold, don't test it, remove it. That's their guidelines. The reason for that came because of Hurricane Katrina. Hurricane Katrina had a lot of mold growth down there, and people were spending money, thousands of dollars for testing, and then they didn't have enough money to remediate. So they just came out with a rule. If you got mold, it needs to be removed. Now, just like air duct cleaning, there's always exceptions. Some of the exceptions when it comes to mold testing is if I have a structure that has a lot of mold in it, I'm going to probably do what we call post-clearance testing afterwards, meaning that I'm going to test the air quality to make sure it's safe to reoccupy after the contractor remediated the mold. But I'm not going to do it ahead of time. It's mold, it needs to be removed. I don't need to know what type it is to remediate it because the steps are all the same. But I am going to make sure before anybody reoccupies that it's safe, a post-clearance test. Sometimes we do some testing because of landlord-tenant disputes. We need some legal documentation to verify that's mold or not mold, that it's safe to occupy or not safe. So those are instances where we will do some mold sampling. But those are usually the only times that we really recommend sampling for mold. Let's go over some things, some different testing methods for mold. Some of the methods out there are what we call the home test kit. These you can get at Home Depot or Lowe's. ERMI is becoming a popular test out there. We would never recommend ERMI as a first test. ERMI is really for scientific purposes only. So it's not something that we would recommend to start out with. Spore trap analysis or a tape lift examination. Those are ones that are probably most popular in the industry. And then one that has some standards to it is a laser particle counter. That's the type of test that we're doing outside to measure whether it's healthy indoor air or outdoor air. The same test can be performed indoors. So home test kits. We get calls all the time from homeowners saying, I've got mold in my home. I got this home test kit. I put it on the counter and it grew mold. These home test kits are designed to grow mold. It's a petri dish. It's a petri dish that has a media in it, and that media basically is designed to grow mold. Now, there are mold spores in the air. You're breathing them right now. And those mold spores, when they land on this petri dish, you're going to get mold to grow. Does it mean you have a mold issue in your structure? Absolutely not. You could put a piece of toast out, and I guarantee you that toast is going to grow mold. Does that mean you have a mold issue? No, not at all. So these tests, when we get them, are kind of worthless for our standpoint because it doesn't mean you have a mold issue. ERMI, as I told you earlier, it is a test, and it's a test that's really for forensic purposes. It is not a test I would recommend for anybody to do an initial analysis whether they have a mold issue. It's being used a lot by the naturopaths out there. It is one of the only tools that they have for people that are having some health issues to determine whether it's related to mycotoxin exposure. So they'll use this ERMI test, but for most homeowners, whether they have a mold issue, ERMI is not a recommended test. It's expensive and it's very inconclusive on whether or not you actually have a mold issue. Most of the ERMI tests are going to send you some latex gloves, a microfiber cloth, and they're going to ask you to dust. And in dust, we know we have mold spores. And so if you dust an area and you send that off to the lab, it's going to do a analysis to determine how much mold you have in the dust. Does that mean you have a mold issue? Not necessarily. It may be that you have a cleanliness issue and you need to do a deep clean. It may not be anything related to having a mold issue. So mold, again, needs a moisture source. You have to have a moisture source for mold to grow. Spore trap test, this is pretty common for the industry. What they're going to do is sample the air. The cassette that you see on the right-hand side basically has a slide in it. It's going to take so many liters of air, run it through this cassette. They'll then send it off to a lab. The lab will break that cassette apart, take that slide, put it underneath a microscope, and then they'll start paying somebody minimum wage to manually count the number of spores on that slide. Not very scientific. A lot of human error. EPA did a study on this type of sampling, sent it off to labs all over the US, and they got a wide range of reports. Now, when they get the report back, there's no place that we can go to after seeing this report that has a federal standard on whether or not it exceeds safe levels. There's no standard out there on how much mold spores in the air is unsafe. The reason for that is everybody is unique. Everybody has a unique system, and we don't know what is going to be a trigger for an individual. Very much like pollen. If you're exposed to pollen or pet dander, some people are a little bit of it. They have significant issues. Some people can be around all pets and dogs all the time and have no issues at all. Depends on the individual. One test that we kind of like, which is fairly cost effective, it's how they test the outdoor air quality. It's how they test for the indoor air quality for surgical rooms for clean rooms, is a laser particle counter. And based on the number of particulates in the air and the size of those particulates, we can go to a standard to determine whether or not we have safe indoor air. So it's a laser particle counter. We can do up to 5 areas in one outside for $195 and see whether or not we have an indoor air quality issue. And that may be related to mold or other things, but we know that there's a potential issue inside that structure. This is the clean room class comparison. If we look at this class comparison and we go down to an ISO 4, this is a standard, international standard. That's for surgical rooms. And if we look at the amount of particulate in that all the way to the 5 microns, we see that we can't have any 5 microns at that level. But if we go to an ISO 8, which is for healthy indoor air, we can have a substantial amount of 5 microns in the air and still have it safe. So again, it's a standard for healthy indoor air. We send our samples off to a lab. We can get a report and it'll tell us how safe the indoor air quality is in each of the rooms, just like it does for the outdoor air count. So we're about wrapped up. Do we have any questions, Sakari?
I don't see any in the chat. Katie, are there any on the YouTube side?
I don't see any questions.
Okay, I want to review a little bit about our company. So we do about 100 inspections a week for the real estate community. Most of those are up in the attics. Usually we'll be out there rather quickly. We also specialize in non-destructive mold remediation, ventilation corrections for your attics. We do indoor air quality testing and treatment. We have an asbestos division, so if you need some help with that, we can help you out with. Still running into some individuals that may have a health issue that want some disinfecting services, so we can fog into structures to eliminate the coronavirus. Why use us? We're a general contractor. Usually we'll have free inspections on your properties. We usually get out there within 24 to 48 hours. In most instances, you'll have the estimate before we leave the property. You can pay out of escrow. We are cost effective when we price match. I don't usually see anybody when it comes to mold remediation less than us, unless they're not doing like ventilation corrections, things of that nature. We're very proud of our team. We have a little over, 1,000 5-star reviews. So if you're looking for a business partner that can help you out, please look at Certified. That wraps up our presentation today.
Thank
Any
you so
additional
much,
questions?
everybody. I don't see any, but I did put my email in there. So if any questions pop up, go ahead and send me an email. I'm happy to help answer them. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.